Hey folks, welcome to Moonshift Audio. When you're mixing and when you're producing, one of the most important things you can do is to maintain your perspective on what you're working on. If you've been listening to the same loop or track for hours or even days, it's really easy to get bogged down in the details and lose the big picture. If you've ever finished a session working on a track and then come in the next day and realize that you actually made it sound worse than when you started, then you probably lost perspective somewhere along the line. Believe me, I've been there. Shifting your perspective is also really useful when you're mixing, and getting a fresh perspective can help you make your mixes translate on different playback systems, as well as helping prevent ear fatigue. In this video, I'm going to share a few tips that I've picked up over the years that can help you maintain your perspective and give you some interesting new perspectives while you're working. Before we get stuck in, I'm just going to introduce myself quickly. My name's Jack. I'm a producer and mix engineer based in the UK. If you're working on your mixing, you might be interested in my Mix Exploder service, where I give your track a professional mix here in my studio, and then I teach you exactly what you need to do to get your own mixes to the same standard, using your own track as a reference. I'll put a link to the Mix Exploder down below, but for now I'm going to look at the first tip for maintaining your perspective, and that is taking breaks. So this might seem like a bit of an obvious one, but taking regular breaks really helps. It's really easy, especially if you're kind of really in the zone, to just completely lose track of time. I used to spend hours, and sometimes I'd realize that I hadn't eaten, I was thirsty, I needed the loo, because you're just so absorbed in what you do. I think it's easy to think that's a really good thing because you're so focused and all the rest of it, but actually a lot of the time it means that you're just really zeroed into the minutiae of what you're doing. And that's dangerous because you're going to lose the big picture. So taking a regular break can be really helpful. It doesn't have to be big. Even just 5 minutes every hour or so is a massive help. If you can, get out the room, definitely. Go and drink some water. Go and eat something. Go outside. Have a little walk around if you can. It really helps. And it also really helps with ear fatigue, which is massive. If you're working on a mix in particular and your ears give up after an hour, then after that, when your ears have checked out or they're getting tired, it's really hard to know that you're definitely doing good work. Tip number 2 is make sure you listen to your whole track as often as you can, not just soloed parts, right? So it's really easy, especially when you're producing or if you're getting into the nitty-gritty bits of mixing. You put something in solo, let's say you're working on a synth line, you put it in solo and you can just spend so long tweaking and getting everything down. And you kind of end up in this place where your whole focus is just on this one synth part, or it's just on this kick drum that you're trying to get the attack time right, or something like that. You can't quite get the EQ. And what you've done there is you've lost perspective on the track as a whole. There have been times when I've spent ages and I've got this synth part sounding really good, and then I come out of solo, or I play the track leading up to it, and suddenly I realize that what I've spent 2 hours working on actually doesn't really fit the track anymore. So make sure you can, as often as you can remember to, just pop out and just listen to a bit of the whole track, come out of solo, listen to everything, listen to the bit running up to the bit you're working on, listen to the bit following it, and it will help you to make sure that the thing that you're currently working on has still got its place in the overall mix or in the overall production. When it comes to mixing in particular, using an alternative set of monitors can be really helpful. I've got these little mix cubes, which I really like, especially for focusing on the mid-range. And something about switching from one set of monitors to another really helps to kind of freshen things up a bit. Obviously, not everyone can afford that, although the mix cubes are great. You don't even need two. Just having one in the middle can be a really great mono reference. The other obvious option is headphones. Switching to a pair of headphones, or even a couple if you want, can be really useful. I use these Audeze LCD-X, but you definitely don't need a £1,200 pair of headphones like these. Any sort of half-decent set of headphones can give you a really good alternative reference. I haven't tried the Slate Digital VSX, but I hear really good things about those. And obviously within that, you've got different mixing environments that you can dial in that will really help to just freshen up your perspective. Another trick when it comes to headphones is to take them off your head and just put them on the desk in front of you. And then if you turn it up till you can actually hear the spill coming out of the headphones, you'll start to get a sense when it just becomes audible of what the main elements are in your production or in your mix. Usually you're going to want that to be things like the lead vocal, maybe the snare, maybe even the kick. So if you start to crank up the volume on your headphones like that when they're sat on the desk in front of you, and the first things that you hear as the volume comes up is not one of those elements that you want to be kind of the main focus of the track, then something needs to change in your mix or in your production. Another neat trick is to move to a different part of the room. Get out your chair, go and stand in the corner, or even just outside the door is a great one. Play the track in full and just see what jumps out at you. If you release your track, people are going to be listening to it in all sorts of different environments. So anything that you can do to give yourself a taste of different kind of spaces is going to really, really help. Another tip that I really like to use often is to turn off the screen. It's really hard not to get into sort of mixing and producing using your eyes. And we've got all these amazing graphical interfaces on plugins and synths and stuff these days. And whilst they're really, really helpful, I think they do kind of suck you into a visual sense, whereas what we really want to be using is our ears in this. So turning the screen off, I used to sometimes just sort of like minimize the door, and then I realized that what I was doing, I was like listening to the track, but I'd like go, oh yeah, I should probably just like get into that email, or, like the computer has got a lot of different things that can distract you. So turning the screen off, or if you're on a laptop, making it completely black. You can use a shortcut on Macs called Hot Corners, and one of the things you can do with that is if you go to a particular corner with your mouse, it will make the screen go black. And that's really, really useful as a way of kind of maintaining your perspective, switching off that sort of like busy, thinky part of your brain, and just listening. Really, really, really powerful. A really useful thing to do, particularly when you're mixing, is to listen in mono. Mono checking your mixes is important because a lot of playback systems are mono. So if you've got big left to right phase issues, you'll be able to check for them before you put your mix out. My monitor controller's got a mono button on it, but there's a great free plugin from Brainworx called Solo, and that's got a mono checker on it if the utility plugin in the DAW that you're using doesn't have one. Another really neat little trick with that same Solo plugin from Brainworx is the left-right swap button. Now, I love this. All it does is it swaps the left and right over. And if you've got any amount of panning going on in your track, it's amazing how different it can sound when you just swap the left and right over like that. It's just a little bit of a wake-up call, and sometimes that is really, really useful. It's also particularly good if you're working in a less than ideal room. If you're on speakers and maybe the room isn't symmetrical, or you haven't been able to put your desk like exactly in the middle, then if you've got an issue or a difference between the way that you're hearing the left and right in the room, and then you swap them, it can really help to bring out any issues that you might not have spotted. My final tip for getting some perspective on your tracks is to take some time away. Particularly if you've been producing and now you're mixing, or just production in general, it's really easy to get kind of obsessed with the details about your track. And a really powerful mindset to be able to get into is to start to think about your tracks from the perspective of the end listener. Someone who's listening to your track at home or on headphones or in a shop or in a club is going to have a very different perspective to you. And I've been in situations where I've fallen guilty of this, and I've also done countless mix sessions where the producer or the artist has got a bit kind of hung up on very small elements. So, for example, let's say you've produced a track and you've got this nice kind of like background synth that just pops up here and there, or some other sort of supporting element of the track. Now, if you produce that and you really like that sound, then when it comes to listening to the mix or working on the mix yourself, it's likely that you're really going to want that sound to come through. And you can sort of spend a lot of time trying to squeeze a lot of things in, or making sure that every tiny element that you work so hard on in the production is kind of right at the front in the mix. But what you end up with there is everything trying to be at the front and a lot of things fighting for space. And a question that's good to ask at that stage is, are you mixing this track for the benefit of this one production element that you like? Or are you trying to craft a mix that supports the song as a whole, makes the track come across in the best way to the end listener? And it may be that you need to make some quite tough decisions about what is going to sit in the background, because there's not room for everything to be front and center in any mix. And sometimes you might have to let production elements that you really like, or that took a lot of time and energy to create, sit in the background. Personally, I actually really like it when there are quite neat and unusual details right in the background of a song, because it rewards me as someone who listens very closely to music. And it also rewards repeat listeners, which should give your fans something to come back for and a reason to play your tracks again. If you're really lost in the details, sometimes it's a good idea, if you've got time, to take a proper break. And I mean like 2 weeks if you can do it. Don't listen to the track. Try not to think about it at all. Try, if you can, to work on something else in the meantime, and resist the temptation to pull it up I know what it's like when you've got a production or a mix that you're working on and you're excited about it. You just want to listen to it all the time. You want to play it on your phone, you want to play it on your laptop, you want to play it on your headphones. If you can really take a step back, then I guarantee that when you come in the room after 2 weeks and you play it again for the first time, you're going to have a really, really fresh perspective on how it sounds. And you're probably going to be able to make some good decisions in that first sort of 20 minutes that will really help the track as a whole. That's it for this week's video, but if you've got any suggestions about how you like to maintain your perspective when you're working on a track, I'd love to hear it down in the comments. Otherwise, please do like this video and subscribe to the channel for more tips, tricks, resources and downloads from me at Moonshift Audio. Till next time.